Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl Manning, and I'm here from TrainingPros, and I'm excited to be able to welcome you to this Learning Views webinar. We have an amazing topic today, an amazing presenter. We're going to be talking about the world of virtual reality. And I don't know about you, but I have an 11-year-old son, and his dreams come true in GameStop. So we have spent a lot of time in GameStop oogling over everything, and especially in the VR world, and it's really making a big entrance in that world, and as well it's making a big entrance in our world in training. So today we're here to be able to talk with you about this in partnership with Training Pros and Harrisburg University. For those who don't know, Training Pros, we're a very highly specialized staffing company. We work with clients to be able to provide either muscle or expertise. And we do that in a very unique way through expert relationship managers like myself who come from the business of learning and development, through a large and loyal talent pool of consultants, and through a methodology of how we work with our clients to make both of them successful. That's me. I work with clients in the Southeast, and I've been doing this kind of work for a while, starting out in the IT world with Accenture as an instructional designer, and then spending another 20 years in sales and service, performance improvement, and then loving my work at Training Pros, where what we do is really provide expertise within learning and development in any kind of modality, as well as technical communication and writing and change management. We have this wonderful partnership with Harrisburg University, which has a fabulous program in our field, and they really have their finger on the pulse of what's new and what's exciting. And today we're going to be talking with Professor Palmer, who is going to be talking about this world of virtual reality, what's happening in it, how to immerse ourselves in it, and then what are the applications specifically within learning and development. With that, Professor Palmer.
Hello, everyone. I'm glad you could join us on this afternoon. We're going to get started this evening and we're going to talk about VR from a number of different standpoints. Let me just pull up my slide here, make sure it's visible to everyone. There we go. So we're going to look at a variety of things, but as I go through my slides here, let's begin. Again, my name is Charles Palmer. I'm a professor here at Harrisburg University. My area of specialty is interactive media. I'm also the executive director for our Center of Advanced Entertainment and Learning Technologies. The center itself is sort of this hub where we can bring together the entertainment background that I have, the learning technologies that I and my colleagues bring to the university, and we do this sort of in a think tank, sort of in a quasi-program state where we work with external clients to do this work. I'm also an author. I've been writing about gamification, and I have a book that if I weren't here with you today, I would be writing about VR in general. I've developed serious games. I like to think of myself as a graphic design artist. I'm a budding data scientist. And the things that you see on the list here are also ways that you can get in touch with me. Twitter is a great way to get in touch with me, as well as LinkedIn. So I have those there. But also for all of my presentations and my cohort in crime, Andy Petrosky, who's sitting in as well, we like to use SlideShare as a way of making sure that the things that we study and the things that we talk about in these presentations are available. So my SlideShare link is there as well. All right, so today we are going to spend a bit of time talking about virtual reality. I want to look at the history so that we can have an even playing field. I want to talk about the history so that we can all understand how we got to where we are today. We'll look at the current technologies, and then we'll look at examples. And I want to shy away from the entertainment, which is where we've seen a lot of this happen, and look at things and applications that are being used in the workplace. And surprisingly, most of these workplace examples have stemmed in the last 18 months or so. So it'll be great to sort of see and talk about how some of your colleagues in other industries are currently making use of this technology. But to kick that off, I want to know from you, what is your experience with VR? And if you could, in the chat box, just answer that quick question. You know, have you seen examples of VR? Have you developed or been part of any development teams? Have you dreamed about your own VR title that you'd like to build? I'm really curious to see from the 15, 20 or so of you that are in the room what your expertise is or what level you're looking for. This also gives me a chance of gauging how our conversation will go today. So Rich has been using the Vive and some phone-based systems. That's great. I love people who say absolutely no experience. Some people have worked on things, beginner, Samsung VR. Okay, so we're all over. We're skewing towards the end of no developers, but people are very curious about uses of this technology, which is great because that means I don't have to make anything up in my presentation. I can tell you things exactly as I have them planned out. So, why are we doing VR? We're trying to avoid this. Pretty much everything that you guys have been doing in the training and development atmosphere is trying to alleviate this particular scenario that happens too many times, death by PowerPoint, some of us call it. But we really are trying to come up with a variety of ways to make things entertainment for our audience and for our learners. VR is really just another tool that we now have in the toolbox. And virtual reality really is this idea where I think about the concept of creating some type of synthetic environment that is navigable by the user. And that navigation might be just the fact that the user has a 3D display that they can look around and see, or that the user can actually move throughout the space. Some systems also allow us not only to view, but also to interact through handheld or gesture type of systems. VR has grown a lot in the last few years, and here's some information from 2015. It's continuing to grow in the marketplace. We're seeing lots of places making use of the technology, not just in the entertainment sphere, surprisingly enough, but it actually has been picked up in a variety of different areas. We really have to blame or credit Hugo Gernsback for a lot of what we see today. This guy, he actually created a system that it was called Google TV, or I'm sorry, yeah, goggles, TV goggles, sorry. And it's really exactly what you think. It's a set of small TV screens that were fixed to someone's head. You didn't move in the environment, but it gave you the appearance that you were there in the content that you were viewing. It was a great invention. He actually had a background in radio signals, science fiction novelist. He actually wasn't a great guy. He had a habit of not paying his authors that wrote with him, but this is one of the things we can be happy with him for. So that's sort of their early days, but we need to talk about a number of technologies and innovations that came about over the last 50 plus to 60, almost 60 years, where we see where we are today. I'm not going to go through every step of here because that'd be a little too boring and exhaustive. Instead, I just want to touch base on a number of them in this timeline. Again, if you need to go and look for more information, you can very easily download these from my SlideShare and go through the data there. Sensorama was sort of a device that you would find at arcades on the beach, on the boardwalk, and it allowed you to, you're sort of seeing the kiosk there. I can look at it. I can stick my head into this opening and see a video of maybe someone riding or a viewpoint from the back of a dune buggy. My seat would also rumble so that I could get the feeling of the motion. I would smell salt air and wind would be blowing on me. So this was a device to sort of simulate you being in a location by stimulating your senses. So Sensorama. We also had early days of, these are the late 60s, early 70s, head-mounted displays. Although this isn't a virtual rig, this is an augmented rig where the viewer is superimposing that rectangle or that cube onto the real world. So instead of virtual, this is augmented, but it sort of still fits into our universe of what we're talking about. Some of the other things that came about were the data glove, and some of the innovators to sort of push this technology were looking at ways of how do we actually interact with the content? How do I go from being just an observer to someone who can actually be immersed in the environment? And there were a number of great innovators in the mid 80s that sort of looked at how do we take some of the systems that were available and add new programming languages in order to create a structure for this type of content. It also should be noted here about this time period was when VR really started taking hold, but it was easily a $750,000 investment, where you had pretty much $300,000 SGI computer running for each eyeball, and then all of that brought together. So it was a rather expensive endeavor. But like a lot of our technologies, once they get in the hands of the military, this is a time when we see them flourish. In this case, the Super Cockpit program looked at using virtual reality and a physical environment for the pilot to sit in. So the pilot is sitting in a mock-up of a cockpit. They're holding a joystick. They have buttons around them. On the headset, they have the content that is being displayed to them of flying flying the jet itself. They can reach out and touch the controls, and those controls will be representative of how the vehicle was moving in that particular case. We have a lot to credit for the work that was done here because this is really what made it possible for us to be able to do it today. My image is missing, but the next is PC power. You know, the SGI systems were great and all, but everyone didn't have one of those in their office or in their dining room. So in the late 90s, early 2000s, when we saw computing power raise exponentially, we now had the ability to not only run the content, but run the content in the home. And then probably the biggest kicker in modern time is the Oculus Rift. So in August of 2012, the Oculus company got together and they started a Kickstarter campaign with the goal of raising funds to sort of get this product into the marketplace. Not surprisingly, they raised 947% above what their intended goals were, and that's in the first 30 days as opposed to the 90-day Kickstarter campaign itself. So in that time period, they raised $2.4 million and showed that there was a large audience for it. They weren't ready for it to be released, but they were ready to see that there was an audience of purchasers or people who wanted to make use of the technology. 2 years later, 2 years later, we saw that Facebook turned around and said, yes, we like this technology. And they made a $2 billion investment. So that's one of those things I really wish I would have invested in Oculus sometime in September of 2012, because they saw 100-fold of their profits the following 2 years. But Oculus or Facebook got involved because they saw this as a social platform of a way of interacting with people in a new way, in a new device. And they had lots of money sitting around, so this was a good investment for them. And then lastly, in 2015, we started seeing these things move into the console market. So that PlayStation, which was the first console developer, someone earlier was saying, Cheryl was talking about her son and GameStop. I actually played around with one of these at E3 and wasn't a big fan of the PlayStation system. It just was a little early, but it was great to sort of see one in the home market, and we're seeing them now everywhere. So that's the history. That's the timeline that brought us to where we are today. But really, the main driving factor was cost. Back in '84, like I said, it was $750,000 to run VR. Today, you can pretty much run VR over just about any modern cell phone. There are apps and systems that allow us to plug our phones into some of the mobile devices and use those in order to engage in VR. So because of that huge drop in price, we're seeing this content displayed just about everywhere. So when we think about the investments, or when we think about what tools are being used, here is our plateau of the platforms that are available to us today. So on the left-hand side, I have two of the primary desktop systems. There are others, but these are the two that are really take the lion's share of the market. We have the Oculus Rift, which is in the upper left, and in the lower left, we have the HTC Vive. Difference between the two is the Oculus is primarily a seated experience or a short distance experience from the CPU, from the computer, whereas the HTC Vive works in a fenced off area. So you can do, I believe, 10 feet by 15 feet, which means your viewer or your participants can be in the headset and actually moving through the space. So if locomotion is important to what you're working on, this is a great device for doing that. Those are desktop solutions. On the mobile solutions, we have hundreds, if not thousands, of different variants out there. Most of them work off of cell phone technology. So you purchase a cell phone, you plug it into a device, and that device has a series of lenses and sometimes touchscreens or swipe pads where you can then interact with the content. Looking around here, you'll see all these numbers, and I didn't update the costs. In the last 2 months, I'm sorry, in the last 6 months, all of these prices have dropped. The Oculus is down around $100, or I'm sorry, $200 cheaper. The Vive is about $100 cheaper. The Samsung Gear VR is now around $50. Sometimes if you purchase a phone, they're giving the device away with you. And the Google Cardboard, which is in the lower right-hand corner, we see those $11 down to $4 and $5, depending on where you buy them. And Alicia's correct. Quite often, if you'll purchase your phone, you will get a headset along with it as well. And this is great to see because that means there's a market and that the content creators are actually creating more and more content for the platform itself. So what I want to do is play a short video. I hope it comes through for you to see. But I want to use this as a way of talking about VR and how we interact with it. So this is from a talk show. There's a musician who has a headset on, and he is watching this little video, or he's in VR. So as you can see, as his head moves, the world redraws around there. And you can see that he is having a very real interaction with the content. So I hope you guys can see this. Here's the final part. You know, a roller coaster that actually leaves the tracks. Then it comes to the end here. The reason I like this, and the reason I think this is so important is look at his face. Look at his eyes. Look at his chest. Look at how red his chest is. This person did not watch an experience. He had an experience, right? His body reacted to the visual and the audio feedback that was coming in from the headset in a way as if he was truly on that roller coaster. You could not tell me that he was not afraid. We saw it. You could not tell me that his body and his perspiration didn't react to the challenge that he had in front of him. In all honesty, I think this is the true power of VR, the ability to create an emotive experience. And if we use it for learning, it's a way of cauterizing that learning method, or cauterizing and sort of making sure that the user understands what they've learned. They're sort of bringing it into them as and I'm searching for words here because I wrote something really pithy and now I can't see it. But you know, he had a physical reaction and to that experience, and because of that, he learned something, and he could be part of something different. Oops. So that's what it looks like. That's how we got where we are. And now we should talk a little bit about, well, how do we make these things? And you really have two paths that you can go about. We can look at capturing the real world, which is the device that's in the upper right-hand corner. That's the Samsung 360 VR, or VR 360. And it has two cameras on it, one pointing in opposite directions, and they capture in fisheye, but then stitch it together in a real-world experience. If you've been on Facebook or you've been on YouTube and you've seen things that you click and drag to sort of view all the environment, these are the type of things that are used to create this. This is a system with only 2 lenses. I've seen them up to 16 lenses in a ring, which allows the individual to capture more resolution and higher resolution into the actual scene that you're developing. And the same for the Hero, the GoPro in the lower left-hand corner. Those are also used to capture the environment. So if you need the fidelity of the real world, capturing the real world is an advantage. If you need to create a fantasy space, such as what we just saw in the roller coaster example, or you have an environment that's difficult to capture, but you need to capture all the nuances of it, then maybe you go ahead and create a 3D model of the space. When we think of a 3D model, we can get a lot more detail that we might not be able to capture with a camera. We can do things such as text-to-speech. We can do a variety of different things when we model it. And we can model spaces that don't exist. I can envision modeling a piping system where the density of the pipes themselves were too close together. So it's easier to model that because you're never going to get the detail you want from just a single capture. Once you capture that content, the system itself then projects that content in an environment where it's going one image to each eye, slightly offset to give us biopic vision or stereoscopic vision so that we can almost see depth. We've tricked our brains into seeing depth. And as we saw from the roller coaster, we know that just tricking the brain can lead to a number of things that are great for the user, sort of really making an experience immersive. And then lastly, in this area, we have systems that allow us not only to view the content, but as I said, also to move around in the space. This is an example of how the Vive works, where you have these satellite devices that are in the space. You have a headset, you're tethered to a computer, and you have wireless controllers. And those controllers are programmable. You can have a variety of different button sets on them. The ones we have are 6 buttons on it, where one of those is a disk that can actually then turn into 8 buttons if you needed to or more. So there's a lot of flexibility in here in how you want to create a system and what you can do with your users. So that's how we got to where we are, primarily costs. We can see how emotive the experience can be. We've seen how to capture or create environments, and we've seen how it works. So let's move into a bunch of examples of why VR and why we should think about using these in training and development situations. I'll go through a couple of these steps and then we'll look at some hardcore examples. When we think about a lot of these technologies, we think of risk, we think of overcoming geography, we think of creating realistic scenarios. Those all sort of wrap together in these idea where I could create a scenario where someone, no matter where they are, can log in and be part of this training. There's very little risk to the operator, meaning we can create environments that we would not put a person in. Something that is, if we think of the health and safety, or if we think of law enforcement, these are great things to do where we can put someone in a safe environment where they can actually use their skills where they normally couldn't use it in the public, let's say. Retention and recall, the fact that I can do this again and again and again is great for my particular users because they on their own can then go ahead and test or explore before we want to assess them on the particular software or on the skills that they were acquiring. We've seen it suitable for our learning styles. That's debatable, but it is enjoyable for a number of people. And we've seen this as an innovative tool. Again, it really doesn't replace the classroom experience per se. I think of this as a way of tying it with my lecture content or some other delivery of content. And this is an opportunity for the user to then go ahead and test the knowledge that they've gained to see if they truly understand what we were discussing, or see if they find some insights that may not have been captured in the lecture or the delivery of the content itself. I included this image because it cracks me up every time I think about it. It's not truly VR, it's more augmented reality, but I just can't resist including this image whenever I do these sessions. Again, I like to use these things to augment our classroom training. It's a way of simplifying some of the content, so I don't always build a scenario that tests for everything we covered in a system. I might build small scenarios that cover very specific tasks that I want to make sure that the user understands. They can be suitable for solo or collaborative activities. A number of these systems will work with multiple users, and there are even systems now that work over Wi-Fi where multiple users can engage through mobile devices as well. You can even create scenarios where you have an individual who's doing the training and another person who is logging in as sort of an overseer or incident commander role where they're making changes to the environment based on the actions of the particular user. A lot of the literature I've seen and a lot of way that people are selling this is a reduced cost. And that can be true, especially when you're thinking about things like where your users are spread across large geographical areas, where everyone can log on at their own time and be part of this and saving cost in travel time, if you will, or just time of being away from the office. And it is scalable for a variety of budgets. Depending on the fidelity that you need of the environment, you can go from something very blocky and low res to very high polished res with lots of interaction. Depending on what you're testing for, you can scale it to a variety of those different uses. So, and then the last in this space is this idea, and I should have put a question mark. I really should have changed the title of this slide to be, is VR better? But some of the things and some of the examples that we'll look at, we'll see that the idea is I introduce your brain to VR. From that, you have a personal experience, and those two things together heighten the retention of the information you gain during the experience. I was just looking through, I see the couple of texts here in the chat window. Yeah, experiential is great. This is just a way of pushing it beyond what you can normally do. We've seen first responders use these things, which are great. And someone else talking about examples. So I'm going to go through some of these, and most of them I've also provided a URL link that either has a case study or a PDF, or in some cases a YouTube video that goes into more details. But because of this platform, rather than me showing video here, what I'd like to do is walk through these. And it looks like we have enough time to get through all of them and then have questions at the end. So deep breath, and let's walk through these examples, just so that I want to show you some of the ways that people are using VR today. If you've heard anything about VR, you've probably heard it being used as a tool for military or law enforcement agents. And here is an example. In this particular one, you'll see it's a multi-user platform. It's in an environment where those yellowish amber lights are actually tracking the user's motion. And a lot of the computing power is in backpacks for the individuals. And then front and center there is a screen. So what this allows the individuals to do is truly work as a team. The space looks pretty high res, but it is actually a 3D rendered and modeled environment so that they can simulate their equipment, so that when they look through the goggles down their weapon, they see a weapon that is representative of what they would use in the field. You can see the automobile. Even some of these street corners being used could be actual spaces that were used. Again, this is so separate from this is the dismounted soldier training system, and there's a YouTube link for that to go in and look at your leisure. Some of the areas that I really love are some of the things that Google is doing, and here's 2 slides to describe this. On the left-hand side, you'll see a classroom where the students are using Google Expeditions. They've got Google Cardboards with a iPod device, I believe, inside of them on this, and they are looking through that, and essentially the class is going on a field trip. Just like we did with the Magic School Bus, where you sit down and watch a classroom of kids take a magical adventure. We're doing the same thing here through this device. Front and center there is the teacher's iPad, and the teacher's iPad doesn't just show the environment, but also gives her notes or tidbits of information about the scene that people are looking at. On the right-hand side is another example of that. I couldn't find the same tight shot, but it's really important to notice this. There we see content is a shark. They're looking at some type of reef system maybe and watching how the sharks feed, seeing them in their natural habitat. They have, as I mentioned, bullet information there that the instructor can read out loud to give context to what the students are looking at. But the thing that I think is the best indicator of why this has been used successfully is look at those little smiley faces. Those smiley faces are representative of each student in the classroom, and the smiley face is the point in the contextual area of what that person is looking at. So as we see 4 smiley faces on the screen, that represents 4 users looking at this part of the area. If a student was looking further off field from what we're seeing here, they would actually see an arrow pointing them in the direction of where the instructor is talking and the content that they're sharing. I think the last best part of this particular example is Google didn't have to create new content. They really just went to this content that they already have in Street View and pulled that into the system and used that as the content being used. So I thought it was a very ingenious way of helping the instructor to understand what content is relevant to the students by what they're watching, and then pulling content that already exists. If you haven't been to the Street View website, go take a look sometime and look at some of their explorations that they have, and you'll go places like the Great Barrier Reef and see what happens when they put their cameras underwater and take a look at the environments. And then the other thing that they've done is these career explorations or expeditions as well, where you sort of have the day in the life of various professionals. And here on the left-hand side, there's a career expedition where you get to follow around a restaurateur as she moves through her space, and you see what it's like to work in a kitchen. These were developed primarily to be used across the world, where students had interest in careers, but no one in their local audience that they could follow and shadow or had mentors. This is for the kid in Kalamazoo who's really wanted to be an architect and never could make his way to Singapore to sort of see some of the structures there. And I'm using that as a real example because one of the examples um, that they've used is something similar to that, where a student has always dreamed about architecture and wanted to see the world. And so the teacher got together a bunch of the students. So there's a lot of great things that are there. And then sort of these roundtable experiences as well, where I can pop into a corporate office and talk to some people about the content that they're doing and find out if this is a career for me. Maybe find people and see people who look like me that I can then relate to and either hear sort of a scripted conversation and maybe even go online and chat with them as well. So there are a lot of examples that we can have of how the career expeditions work as well. Some fun ones as well. If you have a Samsung VR Gear, Fox put together this little tool, and it essentially gives you VIP seating at a stadium. So after a game airs, you can load the content from the game, put the headset on, and instead of sitting in the crowded, cheap seats with everyone else in nosebleed section, you're actually sitting in the VIP suite where they put VR cameras or 360 cameras into those suites to capture the content that way. Another thing that's interesting about this, though, was since all this content was already created by multiple cameras around the stadium, there's actually a tool for pulling up the camera view from different positions within the stadium. So it's kind of it is an entertainment example, but it is an interesting one where if you think about having an experience where you put multiple cameras around some event that's taking place and then provide the user with the ability to switch between different camera angles for different viewpoints. I could see security officers being trained this way, as an example. And since we're on sports, we can talk about sports training. And here are two pretty good examples. The company Striver has done some really great things in training NFL coaches. Started out of Stanford as one of the assistant coaches. He was also a student, and then spun off his own company, where what they do is they use VR camera, 360 cameras to capture VR content that runs various plays. So when the quarterback puts on the headset and they look around, they're seeing the play as it unfolds before them. And now they have to make snap judgments of which receiver to throw to. And this tool that has been developed really assesses of whether or not they truly made the right choice. In some cases, I've seen where people get a big X on the screen because they were sacked, because they never looked left to see a defender coming in. And then on the other side, the hockey experience they have is normally played at arenas as sort of a fan sports section where you can go and try these things out. This one I find very interesting because they merged the virtual and the physical world, right? So we have this setup, but in the headset, I'm seeing a rendered stadium. I'm a goalkeeper, and I see the stadium rendered, but the skater coming towards me is a live video feed, or not live video, I'm sorry, is real video. So I'm seeing someone skate towards me. I can see their eyes. I can see how they're moving the puck. I can see them take the shot. And now it's my goal to defend on that. It's really an interesting one. I haven't seen it live yet, but from how I've seen the things being used online, it looks very interesting. We can augment what's happening on screen with other devices, other input devices. Here is a crane operator, and it's a simulator. So this is part of their training. So after my classroom training, and I want to test my knowledge, this is the great tool that you would use. It has a variety of different configurations where I have an Oculus headset. Here you can see it working off of a laptop, and I have those joysticks, and those joysticks are positioned exactly the way they are in the true cockpit of the crane itself. So I can marry what's happening in the virtual world and in the physical world by actually reaching out and controlling these things. And it's really interesting. There's a lot of feedback to see how people or how individuals are using this in the field, but also how we're using it to train individuals as well. We'll see a couple other industrial solutions such as this one. So here, this is an oil rig platform, completely 3D modeled, and you as a new employee are given tasks to go around and check a variety of things. You're assessing the environment for whether or not it's safe or not. And this is one that really walks you through, and as you're doing various operations, you have to truly choose whether or not this device is safely belted, if you will. In some cases, you see standing water, and you have to pinpoint some things that are wrong in this space. In the medical sphere, tons of things being used in the medical sphere. Obviously, the medical industry has been using VR for a number of years. Here are just two really quick examples. Personally, I think the one on the left isn't a great example, but we can talk through this. Essentially, what happens is I have these devices, I have my remote controls, and I'm able to perform this type of surgery using or getting used to how the camera operates inside of the human body as we move it around. My hesitation with it is the devices you use are not Mimic. So I'm using two HTC Vive handheld controllers that do not truly mimic the devices that you see on the screen there. The right-hand solution, I think, is much better, and this is done for a group out of Ireland. This is for ER doctors as they're training. Instead of being the person who is the hands on the patient, you actually have a staff of people around you. You have to direct them on what to do. Choose the procedures that they need to go to. Choose the labs that need to be produced, and then those labs you have to assess, and then tell the staff how they need to perform in order to adhere to some of the standards that are being done. So long-winded, this is a great example, I think, because I have to use my knowledge that I've gained from other environments, bring that into this situation, and I have to use that to direct the staff members without really having my hands in the system at all. In the medical space, we've also seen a number of examples where they're using VR as pain management systems. And the URL that you see at the bottom there is from a solution called Snow World, where burn patients, as they're undergoing some of the changing of the dressing or some of the things that have to be done to the scabbing itself, they actually watch VR environments, and it literally reduces the amount of pain that they feel externally. There's a lot of research being done in this space, and it's a really good example of how the medical industry is making use of this. Back to industry or some of the other areas that this is being used, a great tool called Safety in a Box. This is done by Texas Mutual. They are a life insurance company, obviously, but they also have, and the word is escaping me right now, workman's comp is a big area of theirs. In this particular environment, you actually have 4 scenarios. And in those scenarios, you live through the scenario, and then after the scenario, you have information pop up to tell you what you did wrong. In this case, it's all captured with a camera, so 360 cameras are in these situations. And so the one we're seeing on screen here is right before you get buried alive. The 2 employees that are outside are yelling at you, telling you to get out of the hole. Why are you there? This isn't a place where you should be. And then a backhoe comes and buries you. And then a placard pops up, and it gives me some instructions on why it was unsafe to be in this particular environment. There are 3 others. You fall from a building because you aren't using the proper harness. You get electrocuted in a cherry picker because you weren't paying attention to the overhead wires. And you get hit in the head with a cinder block because you aren't using your hard hat. So these are all very interesting. Very painful ways to die and very memorable, right? I can now say that I've died 4 different ways on a job site, and each one of those you learn a little bit about, and I can guarantee you if I ever enter a job site again, I will never go without a hard hat because that cinder block really looked painful. Striver, the company I mentioned earlier, they're also working with Walmart to train new employees or train their employees on how to be prepared for Black Friday. So this is something they just announced, I believe, in February, and they're training up for the November timeframe of when that'll happen. So these are just examples of how other ways that you can train your workforce to either just-in-time training, such as in this case, training for a particular event, or more longitudinal training where maybe these are things that I get bits and pieces of over a longer period of time. So Those are a bunch of examples of things that we have out in the workplace and how people are making use of VR in different areas. There are a bunch of examples that are still out there, and that's why I wanted to provide URLs that you can download and make use of. The last thing I really wanted to cover here was show you a little bit about what we're doing here at HU and and we can take a little bit of time and I can answer some questions. Yes, Black Friday and cinder blocks. That would be pretty funny. But here we can talk about a couple of a couple of HU's examples of what we're doing in this space, and then I'll take some of your questions as well. In every company, you have those projects that you've been working on forever, but because there's no external client, it doesn't go very far. This is our plasma racer game that we literally have been working on for about 5 years. And it's gone very little, but our students have used it actually as a way of sort of jumping off and to look at other areas of where VR could be used. This particular tool, the goal would be used by physiology and anatomy students to help them understand the human body, give them another perspective of the human body. Our hypothesis is, that part of the brain that you use to drive home from work and you get home and you realize you really weren't paying attention at all on the drive home, or that muscle memory where you can traverse different areas without really having to think of where you are or how you're getting there. The hypothesis that we're looking at is if we change the student's perspective, if we put them in the body and create a game around it. So I inject the player somewhere into the human body. They've got 3 minutes to navigate from the injection point to the human heart. And they're running through the system, through the veins, without knowing which way the blood is flowing. So you really have to use your knowledge of the human body to get there. And along the way, there are little things that would pop up, sort of road signs that would say, hey, great job, you're 20% of the way there. Quick question, are you closer to the spleen or the stomach? And we would use that as a way of assessing of whether or not the patient or the student knew exactly where they were in the system, or if they were just sort of blindly trying to go through. I really hope that sometime we could finish working on this system because it could be kind of interesting. Although, funny part is we showed it to a cardiologist at one time and they just laughed at us because they said, yeah, that's the shape of the human heart, but there are so many veins and muscles that are used to pump and pull it together that this is not an accurate view of the space. So we took their knowledge, we took their information and still moved on with our development. Here's a short little video. I hope the audio is down. That shows we have a system that's called the Virtue Sphere. I can back up here for a second. The Virtue Sphere is this giant hamster ball that an individual can get inside of. They wear a head-mounted display that's wireless. Because it's wireless, unfortunately, it's a much lower fidelity, so it's almost 640 by 480 resolution, so it's not very detailed, or it gets a little grainy and a little bit mappy. But what it does is the person inside, because it's wireless, we put close the door off, and you can walk. So it's a locomotion device. It's a sphere rolling on casters, so I can literally walk anywhere. We partnered with a natural resources company that came to us and said, hey, we have these factories all over the world. They pretty much look the same, but they weren't hitting some of the OSHA regulations because employees were getting lost in the first 3 months. And could we create a navigation system? We could, but we also wanted to take it one step further. We wanted to build a system that they could use to check other things. So here the employee is being asked to find a valve, report on that valve, and then assess the situation that is going on at that valve. And here the employee knows where the valve is. They've navigated through the space. They've found the particular valve, and then use a mouse click to say, yep, I'm here. They're given a choice of how they want to proceed. We actually chose this as an idea because we found out that they had loss of life or explosions in a couple of plants, at least 2 plants, I believe. Oh no, just 1 plant. But because 2 shifts of employees misread this particular valve as empty when it was really full, they made adjustments that really caused some overheating, buildup of pressure, and an explosion, and a number of people lost their life. So we use that as a way of showing that we can test for those sort of scenarios, and we can make sure that individuals are adhering to some of the regulations by giving them things like this to do. And then because, we do, as I said, we do a lot with gamification, we also wanted to check not just what the employee was doing, but also whether or not they were adhering to some of the competencies that were set. So technical literacy, personal safety, and then we gamified this whole process by letting employees across the company sort of compete against each other. This was spec work. They loved it. It was something that they always wanted to do and go further with, but funding and all, they thought it was just a little bit too much. But we still like it as a great example of what could be done in this type of space. And lastly, from our examples here, we're now working with a system, a newer system. It's called ZSpace. And ZSpace allows you not to create VR experience so much as AR experience, augmented realities. We're actually focusing on middle school age kids to develop games and applications to help them learn various aspects of math and science. Right now, we have a group of students that are working on math games for seventh grade students. They have some really far out scenario where aliens are attacking planet Earth, and you have to fly your ship through these various rings, collecting bits and pieces of a supercomputer. But in order for you to collect those pieces, you have to solve a math equation. And then that math equation gives you those particular items, and then you can build the Uber ship. It was a great example for my students because they worked with a client and they really thought that they knew best. They built something, they got it in front of kids, and the kids hated it. And it was a great lesson for our students to understand that they really need to go back and reach to the audience and speak with the audience quite a bit and do incremental testing to see the efficacy of what it is that they're building and whether or not they got it right. So those are some of the ideas, things we're working on here at HU. As I mentioned, we have a bunch of examples of things that are out there for you to go and sort of ponder about. There are examples that you could use maybe in your own workplace or think about things you want to build. But my question to you, since I have covered a lot and I am a professor, so I end up talking quite a bit, based on what you saw there, how do you see VR being used? What would you create with VR, or is there a situation where you think it would work best? So use the chat window if you could, and I'll answer some of the questions that pop up there. So we can actually, I had not planned on talking about how to develop. We wanted to look at examples of how it's currently being used. But if there is interest, I'm sure our friends at TrainingPros would love to work with us to build a workshop or a webinar just on that, on how do we go about building some of these experiences, the tools that are needed, the skill sets that are needed, and the differences between other types of production. So someone mentioned an interactive view of campus. That would be perfect for an admission staff, the ability to have people remotely log in and see. Industrial safety, I see, is one of those that is key. You can put people in situations and let them make mistakes and see the outcome of those mistakes in a safe manner. Skill practice. I think skill practice is great for this as well. My only area that I tend to stay away from is if it is really important for digit control, for physical manipulation using your fingers. The haptic gloves that work with these systems, I don't think are great yet. I've only seen a couple being used with systems. Most times it's some type of joystick or remote device, and you don't really get digit control as much as hand placement. So we would think about that. So things such as I could turn a wheel to open a valve pretty easily. But if I had to type on a keyboard in VR, you just don't have that level of dexterity. Yes, consequences. So there's a whole area that I didn't cover here that friends of ours from Carnegie Mellon are working on, where they've done things like racial profiling, diversity concerns. I actually put on a headset that really was disheartening to me, where in the headset, on a college campus, I was accosted by a police officer as an African American student, and went through that, and other students watching and observing that and hearing their commentary while it was unfolding. It's actually very disheartening and I guess stressful to me as an individual. But taking the system off and taking it off your headset, you might open your eyes and then seeing some of these situations from a variety of different points of view. Always looking for examples of leadership development. We have a partner that is using, it's not a VR system, but it is a simulation system that I think she might be maybe University of Ontario. But what they do is they have a leadership tool that they're using for C-level employees. So your CFO, your CIO, your CEO, those type of employees. The scenario is you're running a mining operation. The president just got on a 2-hour flight from one country to another. It is now you and the rest of the C-level employees' job to deal with the fallout of a mining accident. So the individuals all take on these roles and they get a chance to play out these roles where the system responds with OSHA and the local news media and Facebook posts, all kinds of things pop up to create this really interesting, rich environment where you're testing your leadership skills. Those are pretty important. Yep, the NFL is looking at diversity and inclusion as well. So those are the things I really wanted to cover today. If you still have any final questions, I'll be happy to answer those. There's my little shameless plug image. As I mentioned, Andy Petrosky and I wrote a book last year on gamification for performance. In this particular case, the book is called Alternate Reality Games, and we look at some examples, some case study examples, as well as the steps you need to take in order to develop these types of tools to be used to improve employee performance or to use it as a tool for behavioral change. So those are the things I wanted to discuss today. I hope you enjoyed. I know this was a whirlwind. I'm just looking at some of the notes. I know this was a whirlwind, but I hope you enjoyed some of the things you saw here. Please, afterwards, I'll upload this in about 5 minutes to SlideShare, and you'll be able to download that, and it'll be titled as today's workshop, so you'll be able to see that there. I thank you for your time. I thank you for your inclusion in the chat session. That's always helpful for us to know that there are other people on the other end. And with that, I'll hand it off to Justin.
Charles, thank you very much. That was a great presentation, and thanks everybody that was able to join us today. I know I got a lot out of it, and I hope that you did too. Please feel free to check in with our LTMS program if you or anybody else knows anybody who's interested in Learning Technologies Master of Science. I put the link in there. Big thank you as always to TrainingPros. This partnership is great for us and hopefully for them, and we're just really happy that we can bring you guys this great content through these webinars. And I really like Charles' idea about possibly following up with another topic. We'll have to put that in the works. Here's TrainingPros website in the chat if you want to check in with them, see how you might be able to partner with them. At this point, I'm going to, looks like the questions are winding down in the chat, so I'm going to shift us to a feedback screen. Please let us know how we're doing with these webinars. We want to, deliver you, just not just great content, but in a positive way and a great experience. So your feedback is very important to us. Thank you all very much as always, and we will check in with you at the next webinar. Have a great day.
What you think? What you think? Hear your dad ramble on. I can't see what you're pointing at. Oh, yeah, it's text to speech. It types as I talk. It's pretty good, but it's not 100% accurate. You actually have to train yourself. But it is in some cases it does.
So hot, buddy.